Hey, Matt, you should go ahead before we get too far and read the
okay, before
guidelines. Yeah.
Yep. So welcome, good afternoon. Thank you for participating in the Technology Committee. I have a few housekeeping remarks before we start. I also hear some feedback and echo there, Ron. I don't know if you can hopefully take care of that. We will do our best to facilitate a smooth meeting with public participation. Ron, do you hear that echo? We ask that everyone be patient during this meeting. We have two formats for participation: the Zoom web application as well as teleconference. Before we begin, I want to review some guidelines and general instructions for the meeting.
Hey, Matt, I might suggest closing your door in your office. It might be feedback from Alex's computer.
Ron got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these guidelines are very important, so please pay close attention. Please silence your other communication devices, such as a cell phone or desk phone. This will ensure that we're not hearing any feedback or causing interruption during the meeting. Also, close your door if your secretary has her laptop running outside your door. During the meeting, all participants on Zoom, except for board members and the South Coast AQMD staff, will be placed on mute by the host. This means you will not be able to mute or unmute your lines manually. After each agenda item, the chair will announce public comment. For those using Zoom, if you would like to make a public comment on the Zoom screen, please click on the participants button on the bottom of your screen. A list of participants will appear on the right side of the screen. At the bottom of the list, you may click the raise hand button. This will signal to the host that you would like to provide public comment, and you will be added to the list. If you're using Zoom on your smartphone, a new screen will pop up with a list of participants. Look for the raise hand button on the screen. For those of you calling in by phone, you can dial *9 on your keypad to signal that you would like to comment. Your name will be called when it is your turn to comment, and the host will unmute your line automatically. Please note you can hang up or leave the Zoom meeting anytime. We expect the normal standards of polite decorum in this meeting. If you do not abide by those standards, you will be dropped from the meeting. And I am looking for if our chair has arrived. Not yet, although I see that Supervisor Bartlett is on the line.
Hello.
I see that Councilmember Mitchell is also here. I see Jacob is here, and we're waiting for the chair to arrive.
She just came in.
Councilman Rodriguez, welcome. See Board Member Krakow, welcome.
Councilman Buscaino is starting on.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Councilman.
I thought I just saw Chairman Wisconsin, Council District 15.
There you go.
Yeah, can you hear me? Hello.
Yes,
Yep.
we can. Hi, Councilman.
Sorry, guys, some technical glitches here. How do you read me?
Loud and clear.
Fantastic.
Over and out.
Hope you're all well. Sorry for the delay here. Let me put on my virtual background. There we go. All right, cool. Okay, so let's move forward. I believe there was a roll call already.
Not yet.
No.
Okay, let's call our tech committee meeting to order. We can just do a roll call, please.
Supervisor Bartlett,
Here.
Board Member Kraka,
He's here. Are you?
Yeah.
He's muted. I don't hear him.
No, he's not muted.
Not muted.
Gideon is not muted.
A little bit of a bad reception. I'm here.
Councilmember
I've got some bad reception on my end. I apologize. All my kids are on the internet. We're sharing, but I'm here.
Thank you. Councilmember Mitchell,
Here.
Councilmember Rodriguez,
Here.
Councilmember Buscaino.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, thank you all for joining us. I believe those who wish to speak on agenda items are able to call in. We will turn to you for those listening on the phone. So with that, let's now take item number one. Item number one is now before us.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Mirasola, and I will be presenting this item for staff. We're requesting to amend an award and execute a contract for stationary fuel cells. Next slide, please. In January 2018, the board approved a solicitation for stationary and mobile source projects to produce emission reductions of NOx, VOC, and PM emissions. In January 2019, Bloom Energy was awarded $3 million co-funding for fuel cells integrated with energy storage on the College of the Canyons campus. Unfortunately, due to current utility tariff structures, Bloom is not able to connect both the fuel cell and battery energy storage components for this project. Next slide. The College of the Canyons is also aware of this and has agreed that this is a good proposal to propose. So Bloom proposes to eliminate the battery energy storage portion, replacing it with additional fuel cells. The changes will not affect the NOx emission reductions, but it will result in a slightly decreased overall project cost. And so staff is proposing to adjust the award from $3 million to not more than $2,934,052 to reflect the slightly reduced project cost, but maintain the original co-funding percentage. Next slide, please. And so with that, staff proposes to amend the award and the scope of the project and execute a contract with Bloom Energy in a total amount not to exceed $2,934,052 from the EO Mitigation Fund. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Mr. Chair, I'll have a question. Oops, I can't hear anybody. Can people hear
Yes,
me?
Miss Mitchell, do you have a question? Go ahead.
I'm going to ask Lisa to explain, if she can, what is this utility tariff structure? Is through the PUC, or what's happening there that we can't do both projects?
I don't have a lot of detail on that, but when the project was proposed, Bloom anticipated that there would be a new tariff that they could make use of, but that's not available to them at this time.
And who establishes the tariff? What agency or regulatory body is doing that?
I believe it's CPUC, but I believe the utility I'm not sure if they were not able to implement it yet, or if the change still needs to be at the CPUC.
And so the question then arises is whether that battery storage component could be added later when the tariff structure changes.
That would go beyond the scope of the current proposal and the current cost structure.
Yeah, our understanding, Mayor Mitchell, is that Bloom wants to move forward as well as the College of Buchanan wants to move forward. So the most expedient way to do that is just install the stationary fuel cell generation as opposed to waiting for the tariff structure to be amended for them to add the battery storage. So we think it's a good project, a zero emission power generation. And so we'd like to move forward with that.
Yeah, I'm not questioning that. I'm just wondering if at some later time, the battery storage component could be added. No, I think we should go forward with it. This is important work.
It could be, and we'll ask our friends at Edison on what the holdup or what the schedule would look like for such a project. So but of course we'd come back to the board if that was going to be entertained by the agency.
Right, exactly. Okay, thank you.
Councilman Buscaino, when you move to mute yourself, we have to unmute you. So raise your hand and let us know when you'd like us to unmute you.
Now would be a good time, probably.
Thank you so much. Yeah, with my other Zoom meetings, we're able to mute and unmute as we're going along, but understand the system here. Any other questions, colleagues? Okay, hearing none. Do we have any members of the public like to speak on item number 1 on the phone line?
There are
Ron, anyone?
no public speakers.
Thank you. With that, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve item number 1.
I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Now time for a roll call vote on item number 1.
Supervisor Bartlett,
Yes.
Board Member Krakow,
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell,
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
He's muted.
Yes.
That was my cue to come off mute. Yes, thank you.
Councilmember Buscaino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5 ayes.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the presentation, Lisa. With that, let's now move to item number 2. We have Ms. Wang.
Here.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. This is May. This item is to amend contract with Metrolink. Next, please. So just provide you a little background. This is kind of like a phase 2 of the projects. In 2012, Metrolink has made another proposal for the replacement of a 20 uncontrolled locomotive for Tier 4 for $52 million. And that project has since completed. And in 2014, Metrolink submitted another proposal under our CalMoya program to replace and purchase a 20 new Tier 4 locomotive for total project cost of $129 million. And Metrolink had request CalMoya program fund to cost share $58.85 million. Next slide, please. So in 2015, our board approved the $22.85 million and was committed to consider the remaining $36 million over 4 phases. And our board since approved additional $27 million in 2016, 17, and 19 that bring the total of a project award to $49.85 million of a requested $58 million. Next slide, please. So the project is to deploy 20 locomotives, but our cost share is only going to the 11 replacements. Metrolink and Caltrain will purchase exclusively with their own fund 9 locomotives. And so the 11 that we replace, the old engine will be scrapped. 9 purchased by Metrolink and Caltrain. 6 will be used as contingency vehicle, which will be operate as an as needed basis. The 3 is for the expansion, so there's no replacement component to that 3. Next slide, please. So the locomotive replacement project in general are very cost effective. So it costs $15,000 to reduce a ton of NOx, PM, and ROC. And we are expecting this project to achieve half a ton of NOx emission reduction a day, since this locomotive operate in average 12 hours a day and consume over 100,000 gallons of diesel fuel per year. And more than 50% of the time, this locomotive operate in EJ community. So we're really beneficial to these communities. Next slide, please. So that the recommended action is to amend the contract with Metrolink, adding the $9 million from our Calmoya AB 923 fund to these contracts. That concludes my presentation. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Mr. Chair?
Thank you so much. Any questions or comments, members?
Mr. Chair?
One point of clarification.
Well, I can't see. Hold on. Who's
This is
Gideon?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. May, you indicated about a $15,000 cost effectiveness per ton. Again, still in a learning phase as a new board member. Generally, what kind of cost effectiveness per ton are we looking for? And how does that $15,000 per ton fit in to generally the cost effectiveness range that we're looking for?
Go ahead, May.
Okay, so our Calmoya, the newest guideline allow $30,000 a ton, and for the advanced technology allow $100,000 a ton. So given the comparison, 15,000 is very cost effective. Now that cost effectiveness has raised from the 15,000 to 30,000 and 100,000 for the newer, cleaner engine technologies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mitchell?
Just a clarification. I think you said that this would result in 0.5 tons per day reduction of NOx. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Members, any other questions, comments? With that, on item number 2, it's now before us. Let's like to entertain a motion to approve, or a motion on item 2.
I'll move it.
I'll second.
Thank you. A motion and a second. A roll call vote, please.
Like
I'm
public
sorry, do
comment.
we have a public comment on anyone on the line that wishes to speak on item number 2? Any member of the public on the phone?
No public comment.
Thank you, sir. With that, we have a motion and a second. A roll call vote on item number 2.
Supervisor Bartlett,
Yes.
Board Member Krakow,
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell,
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez,
Yes.
Councilmember Buscaino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5 ayes.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Wang, for the presentation. With that, members, our third and final item is an informational item. I can ask Mr. Ha to come forward.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Singbom Ha, and today I will present the current range of approaches to reuse and recycling over electric vehicle lithium-ion battery and highlight potential future pathway. Just for my background experience, before I joined AQMD, I was in chemical engineering division at Argonne National Lab and had researched for high energy density lithium-ion battery and cost modeling of battery and fuel cell for transportation and stationary applications. I'm happy to have an opportunity to share my research and experience for lithium-ion battery today. Rapid growth in the market for zero-emission battery electric vehicles is a significant part of a strategy to improve air quality in South Coast Air Basin. The cost of manufacturing electric vehicle also continues to fall and making them more comparative with internal combustion vehicles. In the meantime, understanding of exact environmental impact of electric vehicles, especially the impact of battery production on overall emissions, is getting more critical. Traditionally, most of lithium-ion market was for electronics, But from 2013, it has been growing rapidly by increasing electric vehicles. At the end of 2019, the cumulated number of electric cars, including passenger and medium heavy trucks and buses in the world, has exceeded 7.5 million. With more batteries placed on the market, the need for a solution for dealing with them when they reach their end of life is rising. So now,
Sangbum, can you please ask them to forward the slides when appropriate?
sure. Yeah, so in the second slide. So and now there might be a question do we need a reuse or recycling technology and why we need it? So from an environmental perspective, about 30% of emission comes from battery production, and half of that comes from material production itself. From an economic standpoint, about 20% of total battery price comes from rare materials, including lithium, nickel, cobalt, and aluminum, copper that we can recycle. So reuse of, or recyclable battery can be a positive contribution from both environmental and an economical perspective. Please, next slide.
Next one.
The second question we might have is when we need the technology. The lifetime of lithium-ion battery varies on specific chemistry, size, and purpose between 500 to 10,000 cycles. As an example, power tools battery used every day might reach end of life in a few months, while a battery used in some energy storage application can last for over 20 years. Due to significant growing electric vehicle market, it is projected we will have 3 times of retired batteries in 2025. Although we take a factor of 50% recycling, assuming some batteries are just stored or hoarded and disposed to a landfill, we will see about 400,000 tons of retired battery globally. So answer for second question, is that we should start now seeing feasible options to reuse of batteries and research for recycling technologies. Next slide, please. Here's a diagram of life cycle of a lithium-ion battery, including reuse and recycling. From the top left through the blue line, a brand new battery is manufactured and used. Some of batteries just go to landfill, and the other portion can be reused for stationary application, and remaining portion can be recycled through the green line. Generally, reuse process is simpler. For example, taking more than 6,000 cells from one Tesla car battery pack and repackaging of 3,000 cells for residential energy storage, or taking 12,000 cells for commercial building energy storage applications. Recycling is a more complicated process. Sorry, go ahead. Lost the previous slide. Yeah, thanks. Recycling is a more complicated process through the green line, and there are various methodologies. It costs more than reuse process, but can take pure, expensive raw materials from second-use batteries. So as electric vehicle industry grows, battery recycling also will become more feasible. Next slide, please. When batteries are removed from the electric vehicle after their first life, they are likely to retain significant capacity, typically 75 to 80% of their original capacity. So as we look at current status for reuse of batteries, reuse of batteries are in early phase right now, but retired batteries are coming more and more. So in auto OEMs in US have partnered with energy companies and third-party vendors and startup companies to find out how to use batteries from old electric vehicles. In Europe, several vehicle manufacturers have installed already used batteries primarily in different kinds of energy storage systems, from small residential system to large grid scale solutions. In China, the largest volume of second life batteries will become available due to their huge number of fully electric vehicles, including passenger car, electric bus, and medium heavy duty trucks. And then their government set up the new regulation for battery and electric vehicle companies to encourage to arrange for both recycling and reuse. Next slide, please. So, and South Coast AQMD is partnering with two major OEMs, Daimler and Volvo, for demonstrating electric heavy-duty trucks for goal of commercialization by 2021 timeframe. Both OEMs have a preliminary plan how to reuse the battery from our demo trucks to set up their pathway for upcoming retired batteries. Daimler is planning to take a retired batteries to their R&D center to evaluate the battery performance and conditions, safety, and health factors. There are multiple options in their strategy for those batteries, such as sending them to recyclers, such as Kinversky Brothers in California, or repurposing for another test vehicles, and returning to suppliers back for further test. Volvo has a pilot project for reuse of battery from their electric buses in Europe. The batteries are being used for stationary battery for residencies now, and they will apply the learnings from this activity to start a possible US stationary application. Volvo is also developing a plan that retired battery from Second Life will be recycled to extract raw materials. Next slide, please. From an industry side today, there are recyclers in several European countries, US, Canada, and South Korea, and Japan, and China, and few other countries around the world. Approximately 50% of spent lithium-ion battery are recovered and recycled in those countries. In contrast, less than 5% of lithium-ion battery are recycled in US now. The recycling could be especially beneficial to lithium-ion battery manufacturers, supporting the US automotive industry, because it would breach a key barrier to domestic lithium-ion battery primary component manufacturing, such as lack of an economic raw material supply chain in US. These recovered raw materials is used for new battery manufacturing, which can result in significant emission reduction to produce raw materials as well. Next slide, please. From research side, the ReCell Center, which is DOE's first advanced battery recycling research and development center, has been launched, and it is led by Argonne National Lab and other national labs, battery manufacturers, and auto OEM universities have joined this research program. Primarily, this research project will develop the most promising new recycle process and a new battery design that will enable greater material recovery efficiency at the end of life. This new battery design and recycling process will be demonstrated at pilot scale at the end of this project. In parallel, Argonne is modeling and evaluating the techno-economic and environmental impact of the recycling battery process, including the reuse as well. Next slide, please. As a summary, we see that there are three reasons why we need reuse and recycling for lithium-ion batteries. So one is we can reduce the emission both from battery manufacturing and electric vehicle operation. And we don't have enough reserve, especially for rare materials, for hundreds of millions electric vehicles globally in the long term. And we can accelerate deployment of zero emission battery electric technology more quickly by reducing battery cost. In mid-2018, an estimated 3% of lithium-ion battery were recycled globally. By comparison, traditional lead-acid batteries are recycled at a rate of over 99%, So yeah, we should fill the gap for the recycling of lithium-ion battery, and battery reuse is increasing, but still recycling is in early stage in terms of the development R&D perspective. And I have mentioned in previous slide about 30% of emissions from battery manufacturing. And it is noted that another 20 to 30% comes from electric generation for electric vehicle operation. So if we use electricity generated by renewable sources, we can easily reduce emissions for battery manufacturing and EV operation. So this is pretty much in line with our AQMD's portfolio for the research and demonstration for renewable energy storage and microgrid. In the meantime, the federal government is supporting research effort through national labs working with industry, and AQMD staff will continue to support national effort and look for local battery recycling demonstration opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any questions for Mr. Ha's presentation?
Yes,
Please.
thank you, Mr. Ha. I'd like to take a look at slide 7 again, please. So I believe that you said when we looked at slide 7 that the United States is pretty far behind some other countries on recycling. Did you say that we're doing maybe 50% recycling? Others are at 80, 90, 100%. Can you clarify that for me?
So one of the reasons why the percentage of lithium-ion recycling in US is most of the battery manufacturer is in Asia and European countries. So they are more accessible to the facility, and they have more infrastructure to start the recycling process than US right now. So mostly the older lithium-ion battery cell is coming from the foreign countries, and then most of battery manufacturer and auto OEMs in US, they just integrate the battery cells imported from outside. So that makes some cost increasing to make electric vehicle and battery pack as well. So if we have more the recycling infrastructure in US, it will help a lot for the reducing cost of the battery, the electric vehicle, as well as the battery pack manufactured in US.
And as I understand it, we are beginning in certain parts of the country to do more battery manufacturing ourselves. Are we relying on the federal government to come forward and set in place some recycling standards?
Yes. So especially led by DOE, they are pretty much focusing on the reuse and recycling research and deploying more infrastructure of reuse as well. Because as I mentioned before, so basically the manufacturing the raw material and battery cell is much more competitive in European and Asian countries because the manufacturing cost is much cheaper in US. So the manufacturing the battery cell itself is not cost effective, but so we can have an alternative way to cost down and then environmentally friendly and cost effectively. That one of the alternative pathway is reuse and recycling. So DO is really focusing on the reuse and recycling technology development as a next step.
And have we looked at the cost effectiveness of either of these, recycling and reusing, and compared those? And have we done any kind of analysis?
Okay, so it's basically the reuse is much cheaper because it's a very simple process. Just take out the battery pack, and then from the battery pack, you can take out the small cells, multiple small cells, and you can integrate into other application, especially for stationary. So, and then this is a really good pathway, especially for California, because now we have a lot of curtailment energy from renewable energy sources such as wind power and solar power. So we need energy storage a lot. So, and then within a couple of years, a lot of electric cars will be dumping the retired batteries, so we can reuse those batteries for stationary purposes. So we have the market right now, and then the reusing industry will be growing really quickly within just a few years. For the recycling, in the end, eventually that will be the most environmentally friendly, cost-effective pathway, because we can take out the pure raw materials, which has the expensive cost. However, at this point, the efficiency of recycling is pretty low. So it's less than 50%. So if you have one lithium-ion battery, and 100, for example, 100 gram of the cobalt inside, you can just take out 30 to 50 gram from the recycling process. But so that is the reason why DOE launched the research program to increase this efficiency with the cost down for the process.
Thank you. And then one last question. Is there anything that the South Coast Area District should be doing to accelerate recycling and reusing at this time, or should we just be sitting tight and watching what the federal government does until later?
Yeah, so Sangam, I could help with that. So the way we've approached it, Mayor, is that this is a pretty significant undertaking to look at the cost effectiveness and the efficacy of battery recycling. And it's really, right now it's in the basic research phase, and that's best left to the federal government. DOE has a large project and they're the ones that are really equipped to handle that. But from the South Coast perspective, what we've been doing is asking our project proponents as they come forward with battery projects, we pose the question, what are your plans for the battery use or recycle, such as what we do with Daimler and Volvo? And we'll continue to do that until, and we're also supporting universities on their research for energy storage projects. So like, for example, UC Irvine has a microgrid project where they're looking at the potential use for secondary life of batteries. So those are the efforts that we're undertaking, but we're also working with our DOE colleagues on how to best support their efforts for the reuse and recycling.
If I could just add to that, Mayor, because Matt is actually involved quite a bit on some of the advisory boards, not only to DOE, but to EPA on some of these key issues. And as you heard from Dr. Ha, his relationships to Argonne and others, we do more than just monitor, we actually engage with those agencies and help shape their programs.
Thank you, because at the Stationary Source Committee for the last couple of meetings, we've heard from an individual who used to be an employee of South Coast, I believe, who has a big concern about battery recycling. I mean, citing what we ended up with Exide and that, you know, these lithium-ion lithium batteries have a lot of downside risks in the futures that we should be paying attention to, how we're going to deal with these batteries as we see the proliferation in electric technology. So I want to thank you for bringing forward this presentation, because it helps us understand what we're doing and what we're doing now and what we can do in the future to alleviate the problem with a lot of excess batteries sitting around in our landfills. So thank you for this.
Thank you, Mayor Mitchell. Thank you, Mr. Hall. Members, any other questions for Mr. Hall?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Rodriguez, go ahead.
Thank you.
Followed by Mr. Krakow.
I just wanted to clarify, Mr. Ha, could you maybe just highlight again what would be some of the, as far as the utility of use or reuse, and what areas other than in the vehicles themselves, as far as how that would be practically utilized once it comes through that process of being useful again? Where would that 2 to 3 areas you would see that reuse other than in vehicles again.
Okay, so from previous slides, the largest increasing is of the lithium-ion battery market is coming from the vehicle side. But so see, after the 5 to 7 years of electric vehicle operation, the battery will be retired because all the auto manufacturer and the battery manufacturer, they warranty down to 80% of battery capacity from original capacity. So even though the battery pack is retired from the electric vehicle, we still have 80% of the capacity, as well as typically the duty cycle of the battery is one of the most the harshest operation. So for the stationary purpose, for residential, commercial building, or even larger grid, their duty cycle is much more mild. So we can easily use the retired battery from the electric vehicle to stationary applications. So that is one reason why the reuse the battery for stationary application is really interested. And another thing is that, so there are multiple reasons. One is that the renewable energy sources, we definitely need some storage because in the daytime, we're gonna have a lot of energy from the solar panel. And still we don't, there are a lot of methodology to store those curtailed energies. But so one of the best option will be the battery storage. So
if I could, Dr. Ha, Councilman Rodriguez, a good example would be if you have solar panels at your house, you'd be able to reuse these batteries at your house so you could do storage at your house.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was also the stationary use reference in addition to what you just mentioned. And are there any other examples?
They're mostly for, council member, they're mostly for the energy storage, as Wayne mentioned, for renewable energy, because renewables are diurnal, right? It's periodic. It's easier to store it with some of these secondary use batteries. So residential, we know Edison is looking at large grid scale. So they have a whole, essentially a warehouse sized building out in the desert where they have batteries that are using that energy storage to offset any fluctuations in the grid. So those are the two major potential uses for secondary life batteries. It's just the scale at which you would do that. So there's microgrid, there's residential, and then there's utility scale.
And are there a percentage, or is there any viability of reusing the batteries once they've reached that 8-year point in recycling them within a fleet of vehicles, or once they've reached that point, they're done?
It's probably not effective to have them used for vehicle utility after that. Yeah, just because like your cell phone, you notice that won't keep a charge very long once you've used it for a while. So the duty cycle, as Dr. Ha was mentioning, is pretty difficult in a vehicle because they range, all through the whole power range. And so it's more conducive to steady state operation in a stationary source application.
And the last question, environmental implications of this 3% to 90% ratio that we're referencing as we continue to impress upon the need for fleet change and continue to see our efforts successful in adding EV vehicles. That ratio of 3 to 97% is, can you unpack that a little bit so I get an appreciation of the environmental implications? I can't imagine just dumping them out in landfills is good, right? Right.
Absolutely right.
Maybe a little more color on that.
Only that to the extent that we responded to Mayor Mitchell is that we're keeping track of what the national labs are doing. We're also, as we move forward with our demonstration projects, especially for heavy duty trucks where there's a large, these battery packs are going to be significant, is what do they intend to do with those battery packs? And so we'll keep abreast of those efforts, and we'll also make sure that we report back to this committee if we find anything significant.
I'll yield the floor in a moment. Just as curious for moving forward, if there is any clarification on best practices globally as to, what are the 3 to 5 strategies that are currently underway that enable other countries to do better than our 3%.
Dr. Ha, do you want to address the different activities that Resell is doing?
So basically, so these are the every change it happened just the last few years. So most of the demonstration is under pilot scale, and not only the reuse and recycling, and then the kind of the organized the research effort is, I think to my knowledge, the Resell at Argonne is one of the first the research program to they collect all the different entities from the national lab, university, and battery manufacturers and auto OEMs. So yeah, so in terms of the research program globally as well. So it just started a very recent movement from for the effort.
Thank you.
Oh, can you unmute the chairman, please?
Yeah, Mr. Krakoff, I believe you had a question, comment?
Yes. What an interesting and important topic. Really appreciate this briefing, Dr. Ha and staff. This is a very, very important topic and so interesting, and really appreciate the questions from Mayor Mitchell and Councilmember Rodriguez. They similar to some of the questions that I have. But right now, Dr. Ha, in our state, what's happening to the car batteries and the cell phone batteries? Those are being landfilled right now, or are some of those going to Canada, overseas? What's happening to them?
So large portion of the electronic the batteries from electronics like cell phone and laptops. So in the Asian countries, Japan, Korea, South Korea, Japan, and China, they have their own the raw material manufacturer as well as a cell manufacturer. So they have more accessibility to.
No, but I'm asking here in this country.
Yeah, mostly it's a landfill or the the outport to the other countries.
Wow.
So my understanding, I think, is a little bit different because the lithium is considered hazardous waste, and you can't dispose of this material through your normal solid waste programs. And so I thought that most of the lithium batteries are being either sent to Canada, where they're then resent to Asia for recycling. That was my understanding.
Those are hazardous electronic waste, and so it's supposed to be taken to a appropriate facility where it is shipped off for recycling purposes.
That's correct.
But as you know, everyone doesn't always follow those procedures.
So, Mr. Chair, just a couple follow-up questions. And so, who is transporting or collecting those batteries? Is that the OEMs, the cell phone manufacturers? It's on each consumer. How is that disposal occurring? And is it sort of voluntary in nature? There's no regulations on how OEMs are supposed to handle this?
So there are a number of regulations from a waste perspective. Most of the solid waste, hazardous waste for the state would be regulated by the Department of Toxic Substances. As far as transportation, you have collection centers. If they're handling hazardous waste, they have to be appropriately certified, perhaps as a RCRA, a Resource Conservation Recovery Act facility, either a Part B facility. But as far as individuals, again, as Matt had just said, consumers individually take those type of materials to electronic waste processing centers. They then compile the material, and that material would be shipped off to a facility that can handle it. Whether they're done further processing or not, if you like, we could probably bring in a DTSC or have somebody else, but that is, something not necessarily which we at South Coast are particularly involved with. And then, of course, US EPA has some role with regards to the regulation of hazardous waste.
Right, of course. And do we know when my Prius, when I give that to the junkyard, what they take the batteries out, what are the junkyards doing with the electric batteries? Are they sending it back to Toyota or are they sending it off to Canada? Do you know?
Yeah, it's the same as what Wayne was mentioning. The dismantler or the scrap yard is supposed to take those hazardous waste and then dispose of it properly.
And that may be disposed of, it may be recycled. We're not totally sure.
Well, as Wayne mentioned, they're supposed to send it to a verified recycling center.
There's other regulatory mechanisms that exist for that, not outside of ours.
Yeah, I mean, I understand about the, health and safety of disposing of hazardous waste, but, sort of the regulatory framework to make sure that the manufacturers are accounting for these batteries, that they're being recycled to the most extent possible. It seems like there's a lot of work that has to be done in this area still. And if this state is moving towards putting these in trucks, heavy duty trucks, as CARB's ACT rule, we really better have a handle on the back end of this, A, for health and safety reasons, but B, because there is a finite amount of, the ingredients for these. And if we have to keep mining them, there's big environmental impacts there. So a very, very interesting and important discussion, but it seems to me, and I know Mayor Mitchell, you're up there at CARB working with our friends there, but this issue of where these batteries are coming from, how they're being disposed of, how much is being recycled, these are issues we as a state really have to have a handle on, before we embark on, an all electric, future for our transportation sources, et cetera. And Councilmember Rodriguez also pointed this out, that, the reuse of these for non-stationary sources, getting these in battery storage in the environmental justice communities, holds great promise. But if we don't have the disposal and recycling issues figured out before we embark on this, we're really missing a key component of it. Agree, Mr. Miyasato?
I'm sorry, you cut out at the end there?
Don't you agree that we need to figure this out?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's why we also support a wide portfolio of different technologies such as near zero natural gas, fuel cells, even ultra low emission propane and other types of technologies.
Yeah, this is a great topic to bring to us. The last thing, Dr. Ha, you talked about DOE and the feds looking at some of these standards. What is the timeline on that? And is that in some sort of rulemaking process, or what's happening with that?
Primarily, DOE's and resale program is focusing on the research itself, not the regulation and policies. And then even though they, based upon just personal experience, even though they find some very good design of battery, it's kind of difficult to force to use the standard design of the battery for various multiple battery manufacturer. So there will be definitely the hurdle to have the standardized the battery design.
Yeah, well, our state requires us to try to recycle, and all you local agency board members know this much better than me. Cal Recycle and the state requires us to recycle, as much of our plastics and paper as we can, and now moving into food waste. The fact that we don't have similar requirements for lithium batteries is a shocker, and we should. So hopefully you can bring this back to us and we can find a way for our district to participate in this, because this holds so much promise, but not if we don't really think it through. And that's what I think you're trying to accomplish with this presentation. So thank you very much.
Yeah, just to support the answer. So from the battery charger, the industry, so there were more than 5 to 6 different type of charger. But after since about 10 years from the beginning of electric vehicles and chargers, now we only have major 3 different type of charger. So SAE, they set up the standard type of CCS1, CCS2 in US market, and then all the different OEMs, auto OEMs and charger manufacturer, they are so from 5 to 6 different type, they are engaging into the standard type. It took a while, but So for the standardized battery design, I would assume it will happen in the same way.
Well, I know these
I wanna
truck
add-
batteries, if we're putting these batteries in heavy duty trucks, they're going to be what, 100, 1,000 times bigger than a car battery. We better have a good idea what to do on the back end.
Let me just add that, you know, as far as EVs go, those cars have left the station, board member. And the state has, you know, very ambitious goals with regards to EVs. And, you know, with regards to Cal EPA and some of these others, they're the ones that really set the standards. And as far as us helping shape that, we can certainly be part of that, but I just want to be very clear, that is not our role as a regulatory agency. We have a very clear focus. We can participate in that. And I know, you know, we've got a tremendous challenge just dealing with these air issues. So we can provide input, we can provide the research. Ultimately, though, that what's going to impact this is bottom line economics. Right now, the economics for recycling don't exist in the US. Other than what we have, you see in Reno through Tesla with their battery manufacturing, you have very limited manufacturing in the US. And so a strong regulatory network, and I have no doubt that California will continue to lead the way in terms of establishing those regulations. But as far as our role in there, it would be to continue to work with them. But I just want to be, you know, very cautious in terms of we've got a big challenge right now dealing with the air quality issues and making sure that those other agencies are engaged and aware. And perhaps we can ask some of them to come in and report back on their efforts. And I think that would probably be the best thing to do at this point, so we have more information, know where more to engage appropriately.
Good point. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
Supervisor Bartlett.
Great, thank you. So I know every county is different, and in my county of Orange County, we work directly with all of our trash haulers. We have about 4 or 5 major trash haulers, and they specifically will have hazardous waste disposal days. So a lot of the residents, they know to kind of save everything up. And on the hazardous waste disposal days, you can go and drop everything off at a location. Usually it's at a high school parking lot or some area that's convenient, library in town. So they make it convenient for the residents to drop off. And if you have anything that's really large that you need to dispose of, a large scale battery, for instance, you can give them a call and the trash hauler will come and actually pick it up. They take care of it with regard to safe disposal, reuse, etc. So we have a program in Orange County that is working pretty well because the average consumer, the average resident has no means directly to figure out what to do with these batteries that are considered hazardous waste. You don't want to just throw them in the trash can and let them go out to the landfill. So, you know, we've got counties that are working very closely with the residents and the trash haulers to make sure we've got a great and significant program in place.
Thank you for that, Supervisor. Any other questions, comments? Yeah, it's also really good to have this this conversation now in the midst of moving forward a cleaner, greener environment. It's good to kickstart this conversation now. I really appreciate Matt bringing Dr. Hoff forward with this presentation, especially as we move towards more electric, how we're going to be preparing ourselves for the removal and the recycling of these batteries. So really appreciate the in-depth conversation. And Wayne, thanks for that recommendation. I would encourage some of these subject matter experts to come before this committee and as in future committee hearings. So I'll be working with you and Matt with that. Okay, with that, this item that we just heard was informational only. Is there any other business before this committee? Okay, any member of the public on the line to wish to speak on a non-agenda item for general public comment, please come forward now. Anyone on the line, Ron?
No public comment.
Fantastic. Well, we got through another week. Continue to stay strong, stay safe, stay healthy. Really appreciate district staff for being nimble and being able to come together in light of this this crisis our region, our state, our country is facing, and still able to do our work here. So we are now adjourned. Have a blessed weekend and stay safe. Thank you all.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.